Hello and welcome. Perhaps you're lying in bed right now, thoughts circling like birds that won't settle, or maybe you found yourself here seeking a moment of quiet in a world that rarely offers it. Either way, this is a calm space for us to drift together into something both ancient and immediate, a question that might change how you see this very moment. What if you've lived this exact life before? Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but actually, molecule for molecule, breath for breath, choice for choice. What if this precise instant, with you listening to these words, has already happened? Not once, not twice, but trillions upon trillions of times, across an eternity so vast, it makes our universe look like a single grain of sand on an infinite beach. This isn't a ghost story or mysticism. It's a possibility that emerges from the mathematics of infinity, the physics of time, and the strange logic of a universe that might have no beginning and no end. Scientists call it eternal recurrence. Philosophers have wrestled with it for millennia. And tonight, we're going to explore it together, not to find answers, but to sit with the wonder of not knowing. Throughout this journey, we'll touch on physics and philosophy, on quantum mechanics and ancient wisdom, on the mathematics of forever, and the intimate details of this single moment. We'll ask questions that have no easy answers. We'll explore possibilities that feel both terrifying and comforting, and we'll do it all slowly, gently, with no pressure to understand everything or believe anything. Because here's the beautiful secret. Whether or not you've lived this life before, whether time is a circle or a line, whether this moment is your first or your trillionth, right now, this breath, this quiet attention, is all we truly have. And perhaps that's exactly where we should begin. So settle in, let your thoughts slow. We have all the time in the world, or perhaps, in a strange way, we've already had it infinite times before. Either way, there's nowhere else to be but here, together, wondering. We experience time as a river flowing in one direction, past behind us, future ahead, the present moment rushing by like water over stones. It feels obvious, this arrow of time. Memories point backward, hopes point forward, and we move steadily from birth toward death. But what if time doesn't actually flow at all? What if the river is an illusion, and we're standing in a still pool, mistaking our changing awareness for movement? Ancient cultures sensed something circular about existence. The Mayans tracked vast cosmic cycles. Hindu cosmology speaks of Kalpas, days and nights of Brahma, each lasting billions of years, where universes are born, live, die, and are reborn in eternal repetition. The Stoics in ancient Greece contemplated ekprosis, a cosmic fire that would consume everything, only for the exact same universe to emerge from the flames, again and again, forever. These weren't primitive superstitions, they were serious attempts to understand the nature of time itself. Then, in 1890, a French mathematician named Henri Poincaré proved something remarkable. He demonstrated that any isolated system with finite energy given enough time will eventually return to a state arbitrarily close to its starting configuration. It's called the Poincaré recurrence theorem, and while it was developed for idealized mathematical systems, the implications are staggering. If the universe has finite energy and infinite time, eventually, after incomprehensible eons, every particle will find itself in approximately the same position it occupies right now. Of course, eventually here means timescales that dwarf imagination. We're talking about periods so long that writing them out would fill libraries. But infinity is patient. Infinity has all the time there is, and here's where intuition starts to bend. If we accept that the universe is a closed system with finite possible configurations, and time extends infinitely in both directions, then recurrence isn't just possible, it's mathematically inevitable. Not similar moments, not approximate repetitions, exact duplicates down to the quantum level of this precise instant. Perhaps the déjà vu you feel sometimes isn't a trick of memory at all, but a whisper from a previous cycle, a faint recognition that yes, you have stood exactly here before, thinking exactly these thoughts, forever. There's something both peaceful and unsettling about entropy, the universe's relentless tendency toward disorder. Every process that happens, every star that burns, every thought that crosses your mind, increases the total entropy of the cosmos. It's the reason ice melts in warm water but never spontaneously freezes. It's why time seems to have a direction at all, and according to our best physics, it's slowly, inexorably, writing the universe's death certificate. This is called heat death, the final equilibrium state where all energy is evenly distributed, all stars have burned out, all black holes have evaporated, and nothing can ever happen again because there's no energy gradient left to drive any process. The universe becomes a thin, cold soup of particles at uniform temperature, essentially dark and frozen, with no structure, no change, no life. Current estimates put this ending somewhere around 100 years from now, a 1 followed by 100 zeros, a number so large that even imagining it fails. But here's the paradox that philosophers and physicists have circled around for decades. If time continues after heat death, and why wouldn't it, then we have infinite time with a system in its lowest energy state. And in infinite time, something extraordinary becomes possible. Quantum mechanics allows for random fluctuations, tiny violations of energy conservation that resolve themselves almost instantly. Usually these fluctuations are meaningless, microscopic, but given enough time, truly infinite time, even astronomically improbable fluctuations must occur. In 1896, the physicist Ludwig Boltzmann suggested something wild. Maybe the entire universe we observe is just an extraordinarily rare, spontaneous decrease in entropy, a random fluctuation from equilibrium. He calculated that it would be far more likely for a single conscious brain to spontaneously assemble from the void, complete with false memories of a life that never happened, than for an entire universe to exist. These hypothetical entities became known as Boltzmann brains, and they haunt cosmology to this day. But take this further. If Boltzmann brains can randomly emerge from maximum entropy, why not entire universes? Why not your exact universe, with your exact history, assembling itself from nothing purely by chance? And if infinite time allows this once, it allows it infinitely many times. Heat death might not be an ending at all, just an intermission before the next cycle begins, and the next, and the next, forever. The universe exhales into chaos, then inhales back into order, breathing eternally. Infinity breaks our brains in beautiful ways. We use the word casually. I love you infinitely. This meeting feels infinite, but actual mathematical infinity is far stranger than endless duration. It's a concept that philosopher and mathematician George Cantor spent his life exploring, discovering paradoxes that feel like jokes the universe tells itself. Consider the old thought experiment. If you had infinite monkeys typing randomly on infinite typewriters for infinite time, eventually one would produce the complete works of Shakespeare. It sounds absurd, but it's mathematically certain. Any event with non-zero probability given infinite trials must occur, not just once, but infinitely many times. The monkeys don't just write Hamlet, they write it backwards, in French, in binary code, and in every possible typo combination, infinite times over. Now apply this to our universe. If space is truly infinite, and we don't know that it isn't, and if the laws of physics are consistent everywhere, then somewhere out there right now there's another planet exactly like Earth, another you, reading these exact words, with identical thoughts, memories and fingerprints. Not similar, identical, because in infinite space, every possible arrangement of particles must occur, including this precise arrangement. But Cantor showed something even stranger. There are different sizes of infinity. Some infinities are larger than others. The infinity of counting numbers 1, 2, 3, forever, is smaller than the infinity of points on a line. This seems impossible. Infinity is infinity, right? But Cantor proved it rigorously. There are more ways to arrange numbers than there are numbers, more possible universes than there are atoms to fill them. And here's where it touches eternal recurrence. In a truly infinite timeline, with finite possible configurations of matter and energy in any local region, perfect repetition isn't just likely, it's unavoidable. Think of it like shuffling a deck of cards infinitely many times. Since there are only 52 cards in finite arrangements, you must eventually see the same order twice, then a third time, then infinitely many times. The deck has no choice. Neither perhaps does the universe. If time extends infinitely and matter is finite, then this exact moment, your exact thoughts, my exact words, the precise pattern of neurons firing in your brain right now, must recur. Not might, must. The mathematics is unambiguous. Infinity guarantees it, as surely as 2 plus 2 equals 4, forever and ever. Down at the smallest scales of reality, where particles behave like waves and observation seems to create the world, time gets even stranger. Quantum mechanics suggests something that sounds like science fiction, but appears to be simple fact. The universe doesn't choose. Every possible outcome of every quantum event actually happens, splitting reality into countless parallel branches, each one equally real. This is the many worlds interpretation, proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. When a particle can go left or right, it does both. The universe divides into two branches, one where it went left, one where it went right. You exist in both, unaware of your other self. Every quantum decision point spawns new universes, like tree branches splitting endlessly, so that the total multiverse contains every possible history that quantum mechanics allows. Think about what this means for a moment. Right now, there are versions of you making every choice you didn't make. Versions who said yes where you said no, turned left where you turned right, chose differently at every fork in the road. Some of those versions are wildly different. You as a painter instead of an accountant, living in Tokyo instead of Texas. Others are nearly identical, differing only in which sock you put on first this morning. But here's where it connects to eternal recurrence. If quantum branching is real, and if time is infinite, then not only are there infinite parallel versions of you right now, but there are infinite sequential cycles of you. The branching tree extends not just sideways through possibility space, but forward through time, creating the same branches over and over again. Some quantum paths lead to vastly different outcomes, but some, perhaps infinitely many, converge back to identical states. Imagine the branching like ripples on water, different ripples spread out from different centers, crossing and interfering with each other in complex patterns. But in infinite time, in infinite space, some ripples must eventually align perfectly, creating the exact same pattern again. Quantum probability becomes quantum inevitability. And there's something even stranger. In quantum mechanics, particles can be in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Before you look, they exist in what's called superposition, all possibilities at once. Perhaps you are experiencing every version of this moment simultaneously, but consciousness only illuminates one branch at a time, like a flashlight beam picking out one path through an infinite forest. The other yous are equally real, equally convinced they're the only one, all living identical or varied lives in a vast quantum chorus you can never quite hear. One voice among infinite harmonies, singing this exact song over and over, forever. Our universe shouldn't exist, or rather, it shouldn't exist in a form that allows stars, planets, chemistry, or consciousness. The fact that you're here, aware, contemplating your existence, requires a staggering number of cosmic accidents, or perhaps something stranger. Physicists have identified dozens of fundamental constants that govern how reality works. The strength of gravity, the mass of electrons, the force that holds atomic nuclei together, the cosmological constant that describes dark energy. And here's the unsettling thing. If any of these values were even slightly different, we're talking changes of 1 part in billions, the universe would be stillborn. Slightly stronger gravity, and the universe collapses immediately after the Big Bang. Slightly weaker, and matter never clumps into stars or galaxies. Adjust the nuclear forces even marginally, and atoms can't form stable structures. Change the electron mass, and chemistry becomes impossible. This is called fine-tuning, and it's one of the deepest mysteries in physics. Our universe sits in an impossibly narrow Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold, but just right for complexity and life. The odds of this happening by pure chance are so astronomically small that writing them out would be meaningless. It's like shuffling a deck of cards and getting them in perfect numerical order, not once, but thousands of times in a row. Possible, technically, but so improbable that you'd suspect something else was going on. The anthropic principle offers one answer. We observe these values because we couldn't exist in a universe with different ones. It's not that the universe was tuned for us, it's that we inevitably find ourselves in any universe capable of producing observers. This seems circular. It's like saying fish find themselves in water, but it has profound implications when combined with eternal recurrence. If the universe cycles eternally, and if the fundamental constants reset randomly with each cycle, then most cycles produce sterile, lifeless voids. But given infinite cycles, eventually, purely by chance, the constants line up perfectly. A Goldilocks universe appears. Observers emerge. Consciousness arises to wonder at its own existence. And then the cycle ends. The constants randomize, and trillions of dead universes pass before the winning lottery ticket is drawn again. But here's the twist. From your perspective, you only ever exist in the rare universes that permit existence. The dead cycles don't contain you. They happen endlessly, but you're not there to experience them. So subjectively, you skip past all the failures and experience only the infinitely recurring Goldilocks moments. Every time you exist, the universe is perfect for you. It has to be. You're the proof, which means this moment, this exact configuration of reality that allows you to be here wondering about it, might recur infinitely, not continuously, but punctuated by vast eternities of darkness, where the constants came up wrong. And yet, from your perspective, it feels like this is the only moment there ever was or will be. Perhaps that's exactly the case. If the universe has lived through infinite cycles, does it remember? Or does each iteration start fresh, with no trace of what came before? This question touches on one of the strangest problems in modern physics. What happens to information when things disappear? In the 1970s, Stephen Hawking discovered that black holes aren't entirely black. They emit faint radiation due to quantum effects at their event horizons. And eventually, after unimaginably long periods, they evaporate completely. But here's the problem. What happens to all the information that fell into the black hole? Every particle, every book, every star that crossed the event horizon carried information, its quantum state, its history, the precise arrangement of its parts. When the black hole evaporates, does that information vanish, violating one of the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics, or does it somehow escape? This is the black hole information paradox, and it's troubled physicists for decades. Most now believe information can't be destroyed, it has to persist somehow, encoded in the Hawking radiation, or hidden in ways we don't understand. The universe, it seems, is a perfect recorder. Nothing is truly lost, only scrambled and transformed. Now apply this to cosmic cycles. If information cannot be destroyed, and the universe cycles eternally, then perhaps each cycle isn't a clean reset but a palimpsest. A manuscript written over previous text, where faint traces of earlier writing remain visible beneath the new words. Maybe the fundamental structure of space-time itself carries forward subtle imprints from previous iterations, patterns too deep to observe, but influencing the next cycle in ways we might interpret as the laws of physics or the values of constants. There's also the holographic principle, which suggests that all the information in a three-dimensional region of space can be encoded on its two-dimensional boundary, like a hologram. Applied to the entire universe, this implies that everything, every thought you've had, every star that's ever burned, every quantum event, is written on the cosmic horizon in a code we're only beginning to decipher. If this is true, then perhaps each cosmic cycle is recorded on some fundamental surface, and new cycles read from that record, recreating everything exactly. Or maybe memory works differently at cosmic scales. Maybe the universe doesn't remember its cycles the way you remember yesterday. Maybe each iteration is genuinely new, with no connection to what came before except the mathematical inevitability of repetition. Two identical states, separated by infinite time, with no causal link between them, just pure, blind, magnificent recurrence. You've lived this life before, but the universe has no memory of it, and neither do you, and perhaps that's the only way infinity can bear to repeat itself, by forgetting everything, every time, and experiencing it fresh as if for the first time. Either way, we're left with a beautiful uncertainty. Does the cosmos remember, or does it perpetually forget? And does it even matter if the result is the same, this moment, recurring, forever? In the summer of 1881, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was walking near a massive pyramidal rock in the Swiss Alps, when a thought struck him with such force that he later called it the heaviest weight. What if, he wondered, a demon appeared and told you that this life, every joy, every suffering, every trivial moment, would recur again and again, infinitely, in exactly the same way? How would you respond? Nietzsche wasn't primarily concerned with whether eternal recurrence was physically true. For him, it was an ethical thought experiment, a test of how you relate to your own existence. If you knew you'd have to relive every moment infinitely, would you curse the demon in despair? Or would you respond with joy, saying, "You're a god? I've never heard anything more divine." The way you answer, Nietzsche believed, reveals whether you truly affirm your life as it is, or secretly wish it were different. This is the doctrine of amor fati, love of fate, not passive resignation, but active embrace of everything that has happened and will happen. To will eternal recurrence is to say yes to every pain alongside every pleasure, accepting them as necessary parts of a whole you wouldn't change. It's an uncompromising philosophy. You can't cherry-pick, keeping the good times and discarding the bad. Eternal recurrence demands you want it all, exactly as it was and will be, forever. But there's a subtle difference between Nietzsche's philosophical eternal return and the physical version we've been exploring. For Nietzsche, the point was psychological and ethical, using the idea of infinite repetition as a tool for evaluating how you live. Whether it's actually true didn't matter. What mattered was living as if it were true, as if your choices echoed eternally. The physical version is stranger and more unsettling. If the universe truly repeats, your choices aren't just repeated, they're predetermined by the initial conditions. You don't get to decide whether to affirm your life because you'll make the exact same decision you made last time, and the time before, and the time before that, infinitely backward and forward. You can't change anything, you can't improve, you just repeat. And yet, even here, perhaps there's something liberating. If you've already made this choice infinite times, and you'll make it infinite times more, then maybe the weight of decision lifts. You're not creating your life so much as discovering it, living out a pattern that's always existed and always will. The pressure to be different, to be better, to be more than you are dissolves into the recognition that this, right here, is what recurs. You are the pattern that infinity keeps choosing to repeat. There's something oddly comforting in that, if you can find the perspective to see it, not that you should be more, but that what you are is exactly what forever keeps bringing back into existence, again and again, infinitely worthy of one more cycle. Does infinite repetition make a moment more meaningful, or completely meaningless? It's a paradox that pulls in both directions with equal force, and there's no easy resolution, only the tension of holding both truths simultaneously. On one hand, repetition can seem to drain meaning away. If you watch the same movie 1,000 times, it loses its impact. The surprise twists become predictable. The emotional peaks flatten. You start noticing the artifice, the editing cuts, the makeup, the way the actors wait for their cue. What was once profound becomes mechanical. If you've lived this exact life infinite times already, why does this iteration matter? It's just another screening of a film you've seen infinite times before, and there's a deep existential claustrophobia in perfect repetition. It means no escape, no growth, no learning across cycles. Every mistake you've made, you'll make again. Every regret will recur. Every moment of suffering will return with mathematical certainty. You can't improve because you don't remember previous iterations, and even if you did, the deterministic nature of each cycle means you'd be powerless to change anything. It's the myth of Sisyphus taken to cosmic scale, not just pushing a boulder up a hill, but living your entire life up that hill, forever, with no possibility of ever choosing differently. But turn the paradox over, and it reveals something else. Maybe uniqueness isn't the source of meaning. Maybe repetition can amplify significance. Consider a favorite song. Does it lose meaning when you play it again? Often the opposite. Familiarity deepens appreciation. You hear subtleties you missed the first time. The emotional resonance strengthens. Great music, great books, great experiences aren't diminished by repetition. They're enriched. Infinity takes this to its extreme. If this moment recurs eternally, then it's not just significant, it's infinitely significant. Every choice doesn't just matter once, it matters infinite times. The kindness you show, the beauty you create, the love you give, all of it echoes forever. Nothing is lost, nothing is wasted, everything counts eternally. And there's a strange dignity in being the pattern the universe chooses to repeat. Out of infinite possible configurations, this one, your life, your choices, your existence, is what comes back. You're not a random fluctuation that appears once and vanishes. You're a stable attractor in the phase space of reality. something so fundamental to the structure of things that even infinity can't help but reproduce you again and again. Perhaps the weight of eternal return isn't crushing but grounding, not a burden but a kind of permanent validation. You exist. You've always existed in some sense, and you'll exist forever, woven into the fabric of time itself. The question isn't whether repetition adds or subtracts meaning. Maybe it transcends the question entirely, placing you in a category beyond unique or repeated, simply eternal, simply necessary, simply here. If you've lived this life before, was it really you? This isn't a rhetorical question. It cuts to the deepest problem in philosophy. What makes you, you? Right now, you have a sense of being someone continuous, the same person who woke up this morning, who went to school years ago, who will exist tomorrow. But what grounds this identity? Your body is constantly changing. Cells die and regenerate. Atoms cycle through your system, and after about 7 years, almost none of the atoms in your body are the same ones you had before, yet you still feel like the same person. Maybe it's your memories that make you continuous. You remember yesterday, and that memory connects today you to yesterday. You remember childhood, creating a chain of memory that links all the way back. But memories are notoriously unreliable, constantly reconstructed and revised, and in deep sleep during dreamless unconscious periods, there's no memory being formed. Are you not yourself during those hours? If you developed amnesia tomorrow, would you become a different person? Now add eternal recurrence to the problem. If you've lived this exact life before, molecule for molecule, synapse for synapse, memory for memory, but in a completely previous cycle separated by infinite time with no causal connection to this one, is that past you actually you? They have your exact thoughts, your exact body, your exact everything, but you have no memory of being them, and they have no memory of being you. You're isolated in time, disconnected copies of the same pattern. Some philosophers argue that identity is just pattern. If the pattern is identical, it's the same person, regardless of whether the matter is continuous or the timeline is connected. In this view, you are information, a specific arrangement of particles and processes. When that arrangement repeats, you recur. As surely as playing the same piece of music twice plays the same song, even if different instruments create the sound. Others insist that continuity matters. For it to be you, there must be some kind of causal or experiential connection between moments. Without memory or physical continuity, each cycle's version of you is just a copy, qualitatively identical but numerically distinct. You're like identical twins separated at birth and raised in exactly parallel environments, indistinguishable but still two separate people, not one person existing twice. But maybe the question itself is wrong. Maybe personal identity is less like a thing you have and more like a story you tell, a narrative thread you weave to make sense of disconnected experiences. Each moment of consciousness is its own isolated event. You now have no direct access to you from 5 minutes ago except through memory, which is just another present moment experience. Identity isn't a fact, it's a feeling, an interpretation, a useful fiction that lets you navigate the world. In eternal recurrence, perhaps it doesn't matter whether it's really you across cycles. This moment contains all the identity there is, the feeling of being someone, the sense of existing, and if that feeling recurs identically, then subjectively, phenomenologically, it is you experiencing it, because what else could you be except the experience of being you? Pattern, memory, continuity, they all collapse into the simple fact of this, awareness happening now, calling itself by your name, forever. If the universe cycles eternally, each iteration identical to the last, can you make genuine choices, or is everything predetermined? Your apparent free will nothing more than the feeling of inevitability flowing through you. This is determinism's hardest question, made even harder by eternal recurrence. In a standard deterministic universe, you might argue that even though the future is fixed by the past and the laws of physics, it still feels open from the inside. You don't know what you'll choose, so subjectively, the future remains undecided. It's like watching a recorded movie for the first time. The outcome is already determined, but your ignorance preserves the experience of suspense. But add eternal recurrence, and something shifts. It's not just that the future is determined by the past, it's that the past is determined by the cycle before, and that cycle by the one before it. backward into infinity. You're not just watching a movie that's already been recorded, you're watching a movie that's already played infinite times, with you making the exact same choices at every showing. When you decide something, it's not that you could have chosen differently but didn't, it's that you never could have chosen differently, ever, across infinite iterations. This sounds like it should rob your choices of meaning. If you're just a mechanism playing out a predetermined script, how can any decision be truly yours? You're a puppet with no strings, a robot following programming you can't see, an actor reading lines you didn't write, performing a play that's been staged infinite times before to an empty theatre. And yet when it comes to free will, what if the feeling of choice is all that matters? When you deliberate, weigh options, and make a decision, that cognitive process is real. The neurons firing, the thoughts arising, the sense of agency, all of it actually happens inside you. Maybe free will isn't about being able to have chosen differently. Maybe it's about being the kind of thing that goes through the process of choosing, regardless of whether the outcome was inevitable. Philosophers call this compatibilism, the idea that free will and determinism can coexist. You're free not because you could have done otherwise, but because your choices flow from your own desires, beliefs, and reasoning. External forces aren't making you act against your will. You're doing exactly what you want, even if what you want was determined by prior causes stretching back to the Big Bang and forward to the Big Bang after that. There's also the quantum escape hatch. If the universe is fundamentally indeterministic at the quantum level, and most interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest it is, then maybe there's genuine randomness in each cycle. Perhaps not every iteration is perfectly identical. Tiny quantum fluctuations might propagate upward, creating subtle variations. Your choices in this cycle might differ infinitesimally from the previous one, and those differences might compound over time. You're not free in the sense of transcending causality, but you're not perfectly trapped either. You're surfing the quantum foam, steering within narrow margins, making micro choices that matter even if the general pattern repeats. Or maybe freedom is the wrong framework entirely. Maybe an eternal recurrence. You're not trying to escape the pattern, you are the pattern. You're not a prisoner of repetition, you're the shape infinity keeps returning to. The choice isn't between freedom and determinism, it's between resistance and acceptance, between wishing you could be different and recognizing that what you are is exactly what the universe across infinite time has chosen to be. If you've loved someone in infinite previous cycles, and you'll love them in infinite future cycles, does that make the love more profound or less real? It's a question that transforms the most intimate human experience into a cosmological puzzle. On the surface, eternal recurrence seems to threaten love's authenticity. Part of what makes love meaningful is choice, the sense that out of all possible people, in all possible moments, you chose this person. You built something together from nothing, creating a unique bond in a world of flux and change. But if you've chosen them infinite times before, in exactly the same way, for exactly the same reasons, is it really choice, or is it just inevitability, wearing a romantic mask? And there's something unsettling about perfect repetition in relationships. You'll have the same conversations, the same fights, the same reconciliations. That moment when you first realized you loved them, you've experienced it infinite times already. The surprise is gone. The discovery is impossible because there's nothing to discover. It's all happened before, exactly as it's happening now. How can love stay alive when mystery and growth are impossible? But look at it from another angle. Maybe love isn't diminished by inevitability. Maybe it's validated. The universe, across infinite cycles, keeps bringing you two together. Out of all possible configurations of matter, all possible arrangements of human meetings and partings, this connection is so fundamental that it recurs eternally. You're not just soulmates in the poetic sense, you're cosmological constants, bound together by something deeper than choice, deeper than chance. You were meant to meet, literally, mathematically meant to, guaranteed by the structure of eternal return itself. And repetition, in love, isn't always deadening. Couples in long marriages sometimes say they fall in love again and again with the same person, discovering new depths in familiar territory. The best relationships aren't about constant novelty, but about returning to the same person, the same moments, and finding them inexhaustibly rich. Eternal recurrence is like that, but amplified to infinity. You don't get bored with this person across infinite cycles because each time you're experiencing it fresh with no memory of the previous iterations. The love is always new to you, even as it's always been. There's also something beautiful about the deterministic nature of it. In this cycle, maybe you worry whether your relationship will last, whether you're making the right choice, whether this person is truly the one, but eternal recurrence answers, yes, definitively yes, not because you've consciously chosen them through some act of will, but because the universe's structure, the physics, the initial conditions, the way everything unfolds, leads inexorably to this bond, this love, this specific pattern of two lives intertwining. The relationship isn't contingent, it's necessary, it's written into the fabric of what recurs. Perhaps the most radical possibility is this. Love in eternal recurrence teaches us that freedom and fate aren't opposites. You love this person freely, experiencing genuine choice, genuine emotion, genuine connection, and simultaneously, you love them necessarily because the pattern of reality keeps forming this exact bond. Both are true. You're not choosing against fate or within fate. You're choosing as fate, expressing through your individual consciousness, something that the universe across infinite time affirms again and again, this love, here, now, eternally. If every action you take repeats infinitely, does that make ethics more important or completely irrelevant? The moral implications of eternal recurrence are dizzying, pulling us in seemingly contradictory directions. Start with the amplifying view. Every choice you make doesn't just affect this moment, it echoes infinitely. That kindness you showed to a stranger, you've shown it infinite times before, and you'll show it infinite times again. The harm you caused, also infinite. Under this lens, moral responsibility becomes cosmically weighted. You're not just creating good or bad in this cycle, you're affirming a pattern that will recur forever. The stakes couldn't be higher. This is Nietzsche's ethical test made concrete. If you knew every action would repeat eternally, would you act differently? Would you treat people better, live more carefully, choose more wisely? Eternal recurrence becomes a moral litmus test. Only do what you'd want to do infinitely. It's the categorical imperative taken to its logical extreme. Act only in ways you'd will to become cosmic law, because in a sense they already are. There's something almost karmic about this view. Though karma usually implies learning and growth across lifetimes, in eternal recurrence you don't learn, you just repeat. But the structure is similar. Your actions have consequences that extend beyond this moment, creating patterns that persist. The difference is that instead of consequences carrying forward to a future life, they carry sideways through infinite identical cycles. You're not escaping the results of your choices, you're trapped with them forever. But flip the perspective, and ethics might collapse entirely. If everything is predetermined, if you have no genuine freedom to act differently than you did in the previous cycle, then moral responsibility seems impossible. You can't be blamed or praised for actions you had no power to avoid. You're not making choices, you're enacting a script. The good person and the evil person are equally trapped in their patterns, and neither deserves judgment. Eternal recurrence makes morality irrelevant, because it makes agency an illusion. Yet there's a middle path, harder to articulate but perhaps more true. Maybe moral responsibility doesn't require the ability to have chosen differently. Maybe it emerges from being the kind of system that cares about ethics, that deliberates about right and wrong, that responds to moral reasoning. When you choose kindness over cruelty, even if that choice was determined by your nature and circumstances, you're still expressing something real, your values, your character, your response to the world. In eternal recurrence, you can't change the pattern, but you are the pattern. The ethics of your life aren't imposed on you, they're intrinsic to you. You're not being forced to repeat kind or cruel actions. Those actions are you, expressed across infinite iterations, and there's a strange dignity in that. The universe, in choosing to repeat your pattern infinitely, is in a sense affirming your ethical stance, your way of being, as something worth infinite repetition. Perhaps the ultimate ethical insight of eternal return is this: live as if this moment is all there is, because from your subjective perspective it is. You have no memory of previous cycles and no foreknowledge of future ones. All you have is now, this choice, this action, and the remarkable thing is that in making this choice, in living this moment fully, you're also living infinite moments, All the times this has recurred and will recur. Ethics becomes radically present-focused, not because consequences don't matter, but because this instant contains all consequences infinitely. Make it count. You're standing in a room you've never entered before, but something feels uncannily familiar. The angle of light through the window, the arrangement of furniture, the precise quality of the air. You've been here before, you're certain of it, even though you know rationally that's impossible. This is déjà vu, from French meaning already seen, and it's one of the most common altered experiences of consciousness, with roughly 2/3 of people reporting it at least once in their lives. Neuroscience has a straightforward explanation. Déjà vu likely results from a minor malfunction in the temporal lobe, where memories are processed. Sometimes the brain misfires, tagging a present experience with the emotional quality of memory, before it's actually been encoded as a memory. You're experiencing something and remembering it simultaneously, creating the weird sensation of having lived this moment before. It's a glitch, essentially. Your brain's filing system putting something in the past folder while you're still experiencing it as present. Certain conditions make déjà vu more likely. Stress, fatigue, and changes in brain chemistry can all trigger it. People with epilepsy, particularly temporal lobe epilepsy, report intense and frequent déjà vu experiences. There are even rare neurological cases where people feel trapped in permanent déjà vu, where every moment feels like it's being repeated, creating a nightmarish sense of being stuck in an eternal loop. But what if the glitch explanation isn't complete? What if some déjà vu experiences are exactly what they feel like? Genuine recognition of a moment you've actually lived before, not in this cycle of the universe, but in a previous one. If eternal recurrence is real, if you have lived this exact life infinite times, then perhaps the brain's temporal lobe isn't malfunctioning. Maybe it's picking up on something deeper, a faint signal from a previous iteration leaking through the walls of time. Of course, this seems impossible. There's no mechanism we know of by which information from a previous cosmic cycle could influence this one. The previous universe ended in heat death or big crunch, all structure erased, all information seemingly lost. And yet we've seen hints that information might not be destroyable, that quantum states might persist in ways we don't fully understand. Could there be a cosmic memory, an information substrate that survives the death and rebirth of universes? Or maybe the explanation is simpler and stranger. Déjà vu feels like recognition because it is recognition, but not of a past event, of an eternal pattern. When you experience déjà vu, you're not remembering the previous cycle. You're sensing the atemporal pattern itself, the way this moment fits into the structure of what recurs. You're experiencing a kind of fourth-dimensional awareness, where past, present, and future collapse into a single, eternal now. The moment feels familiar, not because you remember it, but because you exist outside of time's flow in some sense, and the temporal you is briefly recognizing what the eternal you has always known. This moment, exactly like this, forever. We can't prove any of this, of course. Déjà vu remains a neurological curiosity, most likely explained by ordinary brain processes. But in the space between what we know and what we don't, there's room to wonder. Maybe every experience of déjà vu is a tiny window into the eternal return, a brief disorienting glimpse of the fact that yes, you have stood exactly here before, thinking exactly these thoughts, feeling exactly this uncanny recognition, infinite times backward and infinite times forward, always new and always remembered, always both. Walk through the ruins of any ancient civilization, Rome, Babylon, the Mayans, Angkor Wat, and you can see the pattern. Rise, flourishing, complexity, overreach, collapse. It's been repeated so many times that historians have catalogued it, given it names, built theories around the cycle. Societies grow, reach a peak of power and sophistication, then fragment and fall, often surprisingly quickly. And then, centuries later, new civilizations emerge from the ashes and begin the process again. Oswald Spengler, in his massive work The Decline of the West, argued that civilizations are like organisms with predictable life cycles. They're born, they mature, they age, they die. He saw cultures as having seasons: spring for growth, summer for full flowering, autumn for sophisticated decay, winter for final collapse. Arnold Toynbee, studying history even more exhaustively, identified a challenge and response pattern. Civilizations that successfully meet challenges grow stronger, but success breeds complacency, and eventually they fail to adapt to new challenges and decline. The pattern appears remarkably consistent across different times and places. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE saw multiple advanced civilizations, Mycenaean Greece, the Hittites, Ugarit, fall almost simultaneously in what historians call a systems collapse. The fall of Rome echoes in the dissolution of the Han dynasty in China at roughly the same time. The cycle of Chinese dynasties rise, Golden Age, corruption, peasant revolt, new dynasty, repeated with striking regularity for thousands of years. Why does this happen? Part of it is entropy and complexity. Civilizations solve problems by adding layers of bureaucracy, infrastructure, and interconnection. This works magnificently until it doesn't, until the system becomes too complex to maintain, too rigid to adapt, too interconnected, such that failures in one area cascade everywhere. Joseph Tainter, in The Collapse of Complex Societies, argues that complexity has diminishing returns. Eventually, it costs more to maintain the system than it produces, and collapse becomes the rational outcome. But there's something deeper and more unsettling here when we consider eternal recurrence. Are these historical cycles just patterns of human behavior and physics, or are they attractor states, configurations that systems inevitably return to? Maybe civilizations don't just follow similar patterns, maybe they're trapped in a kind of historical recurrence, pulled by invisible forces toward the same outcomes regardless of individual choices. Think about how often the same problems recur: inequality leading to instability, expansion overextending resources, technological advancement outpacing wisdom, leaders becoming disconnected from the people, different names, different technologies, different specific circumstances, but the deep structure remains the same. Perhaps history doesn't repeat precisely, but it rhymes, as Mark Twain supposedly said. Or perhaps, and this is the unsettling thought, history repeats exactly, on a cosmic scale, and what we see as variations within one cycle are just noise around a deeper deterministic pattern. If the universe recurs, then civilizations recur too, not just similar civilizations, but the exact same ones. Rome falls in exactly this way, with these people, these words, these specific betrayals and battles. Your life is embedded in a civilization that is itself embedded in a cosmic pattern, and all of it repeats together, eternally. The rise and fall you're part of has happened before, and will happen again. You can't escape history, because history can't escape itself. Or maybe the cycles are nested differently. Maybe each cosmic recurrence tries all possible variations, civilizations that rise and fall in infinite different ways, and somewhere in that vast space of possibilities your specific version recurs. History becomes a kind of cosmic exploration of all possible ways societies can be born and die, and we're living through one specific trajectory that will eventually repeat when infinity exhausts its other options. Either way, when you look at those ancient ruins, you might be looking at your own future and your own infinite past simultaneously, the end point and the starting point of a loop so vast it encompasses everything, including the civilizations that try to understand it. What if none of this is real in the way you think it is? What if you're not a biological organism in a physical universe, but a pattern of information running in a vast computer simulation? And if you are simulated, what if the simulation has been run before, many times before, and you're living through an identical rerun? This is the simulation hypothesis, popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom in 2003. Though the idea is much older, the argument goes something like this. If it's possible for civilizations to create realistic simulations of conscious beings, and given the exponential growth of computing power, this seems likely eventually, then there will be vastly more simulated conscious beings than biological ones. Most people will be simulations, so probabilistically, you're almost certainly simulated rather than real. The logic is cleaner than it might first appear. Imagine a civilization that reaches the point where it can run detailed ancestor simulations, recreations of past eras complete with conscious thinking entities who believe they're living in the real world. If that civilization runs even one such simulation, there are now more simulated people than real ones in their history. If they run 1,000 simulations, the ratio becomes absurd. And if any civilization in the universe reaches this capability and uses it, the proportion of conscious beings who are simulated approaches 100%. Now, Connect this to eternal recurrence. If you're in a simulation, reruns are trivial. The simulation operators don't need to wait for heat death and quantum fluctuations to produce your exact life again. They just reset the program and run it again. Every time you experience this moment, you're not living in a new cycle of a physical universe. You're experiencing another playthrough of the same simulation code. This makes certain aspects of eternal recurrence clearer. The perfect determinism makes sense because simulations are deterministic, run the same code with the same inputs, get the same outputs. The question of whether it's really you across iterations becomes whether the same running software constitutes the same person, which philosophers of mind have debated extensively regarding identity and computation. The lack of memory from previous cycles is explained by the simulation resetting. Your memories are erased with each new run. But it also introduces new questions. Why would anyone run the exact same simulation infinite times? Maybe they're testing something, varying conditions slightly between runs to see what changes. Maybe it's not intentional repetition, but archival. Every run is saved, existing simultaneously in some higher dimensional storage, and you're experiencing one instance among infinite parallel copies. Maybe the simulation itself is part of a larger eternal recurrence, where the simulators are themselves simulated, nested in layers that ultimately cycle back on themselves. There's something both comforting and horrifying about the simulation hypothesis, merged with eternal return. Comforting because your existence isn't subject to the random mercy of quantum fluctuations and entropy. Someone, somewhere, deliberately chose to create you, infinite times. Horrifying because you're not just trapped in a repeating universe, you're trapped in a repeating program, possibly being watched, possibly being studied, definitely not in control of the parameters of your own existence. Of course, the simulation hypothesis might be unfalsifiable. If the simulation is perfect, there's no way to detect you're in one. Any evidence that might reveal it would simply be part of the simulation. But perfect unfalsifiability doesn't mean it's not true. It might be the most accurate description of reality we could possibly have, and we'd never be able to prove it. You might be a pattern of information running on substrate beyond your comprehension, living this exact life for the millionth time, never knowing, never remembering, never escaping, never needing to, because from the inside, it feels exactly like reality, which in every way that matters to you, it is. Roughly 85% of the matter in the universe is invisible. We can't see it, can't touch it, can't detect it directly in any way. We only know it exists because of its gravitational effects. Galaxies spinning too fast, light bending more than visible matter can explain, the large-scale structure of the universe requiring vast amounts of additional mass to form. We call it dark matter, and despite decades of searching, we still don't know what it is. And then there's dark energy, even more mysterious. It makes up about 68% of the universe's total energy, and it's causing the universe to expand at an accelerating rate, pushing galaxies apart faster and faster. We have equations that describe its effects, but no idea what it actually is. It's placeholder name for a phenomenon we can measure but not explain. Together, dark matter and dark energy constitute about 95% of everything that exists. Ordinary matter, the stuff of stars and planets and bodies and thoughts, is just 5% of reality. We live in a universe where we're blind to almost everything, like fish in an ocean who can only perceive 5% of the water. This opens extraordinary possibilities for hidden cycles. What if dark matter and dark energy aren't just passive components but active participants in cosmic cycles we can't observe? What if the dark sectors of reality undergo transformations and repetitions that ordinary matter knows nothing about? Perhaps the visible universe dies and is reborn, but the dark matter substrate persists, carrying information forward, guiding the next cycle. Some cosmologists have proposed cyclic models specifically involving dark energy. One version, developed by Paul Steinhardt and Neil Turok, suggests the universe undergoes an infinite series of expansions and contractions. Instead of a single Big Bang followed by eternal expansion or eventual collapse, there are countless bounces. The universe expands, expansion slows, reverses, contracts to a small but finite size, then bounces back into a new expansion. Dark energy might drive this cycle, its properties changing in ways that create a cosmic heartbeat. In these cyclic models, time doesn't begin with the Big Bang. That was just one bounce among infinite bounces before and after. The laws of physics might remain constant across cycles, or they might vary slightly, creating a kind of cosmic evolution where different cycles experiment with different configurations. Our cycle happens to have laws that permit complexity and consciousness, but countless other cycles might have been sterile and empty. But here's the connection to eternal recurrence. If cycles repeat infinitely, and if there are only finite possible configurations of matter and energy, even accounting for dark matter, then perfect repetition becomes inevitable. Eventually, a bounce produces initial conditions exactly matching those of a previous cycle. From that point forward, everything unfolds identically. Same galaxies, same planets, same you, thinking these exact thoughts. The dark sector might even explain how information persists across cycles. If dark matter doesn't interact electromagnetically, perhaps it also doesn't fully participate in heat death. While ordinary matter decays to equilibrium, dark matter might retain structure, encoding information in ways we can't detect. When the universe bounces, that information guides the formation of the next cycle, ensuring recurrence. Or maybe dark matter is itself conscious, a vast invisible intelligence that experiences all cycles simultaneously, creating and recreating the visible universe as a kind of exploration or art. You're a temporary pattern in ordinary matter, but you're embedded in and sustained by a dark matter framework that has existed through all cycles, making you both ephemeral and eternal, your specific iteration brief, but your pattern held forever in structures beyond light. We don't know. That's the honest answer. Dark matter and dark energy are names for our ignorance, but ignorance creates space for wonder. Somewhere in that missing 95% of reality might be the mechanism of eternal return, the cosmic memory, the hidden wheels driving cycles we barely glimpse. And every time you look up at the night sky, you're seeing just the foam on the surface of an ocean whose depths contain everything, including perhaps the eternal pattern of your own recurring existence. In quantum mechanics, observation matters, not metaphorically, but literally. The act of measuring a quantum system affects its state. Before measurement, particles exist in superposition, simultaneously occupying multiple states. After measurement, they collapse into a single definite state. This is the observer effect, and while it's well established at microscopic scales, its implications for reality as a whole remain profoundly mysterious. The classic example is the double-slit experiment. Send electrons through two slits one at a time, and they create an interference pattern as if each electron passes through both slits simultaneously and interferes with itself. But place a detector to observe which slit the electron goes through, and the interference pattern disappears. The electron behaves like a particle going through one slit or the other, not both. Observation literally changes the outcome of the experiment. For decades, physicists have debated what this means. Is consciousness special, somehow collapsing quantum wave functions? Or is any interaction that could potentially carry information about the system sufficient to cause collapse, whether or not a conscious being observes it? The question remains open, touching the boundary between physics and philosophy in uncomfortable ways. Now scale this up. If observation affects quantum systems, and quantum processes underlie all physical processes, does observation affect reality at cosmic scales? Does the universe require observers to become definite? John Wheeler, one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, proposed something radical, the participatory anthropic principle. He suggested that observers don't just witness the universe, they participate in creating it by collapsing quantum possibilities into definite actualities. Wheeler imagined a scenario where the universe starts in a quantum superposition of all possible states. Billions of years pass, and eventually observers emerge. Those observers begin making measurements, collapsing wave functions, determining which quantum possibilities become real. But those measurements propagate backward in time, selecting which early universe quantum states could have led to observers emerging. In a sense, the universe's present creates its past, observers reaching back through time to select their own cosmic history from infinite quantum possibilities. This connects to eternal recurrence in strange ways. If consciousness plays a role in collapsing possibilities into actualities, what happens across cosmic cycles? Perhaps each cycle's observers collapse quantum states differently, creating subtle variations, or perhaps the act of observation itself is part of what recurs. The same observers collapsing the same possibilities in the same ways, ensuring each cycle proceeds identically. There's a deeper possibility. Maybe consciousness is the mechanism of eternal return. Each moment of observation collapses infinite quantum branches into one actualized state. But those other branches don't disappear. In the many worlds interpretation, they continue existing as parallel realities. Across infinite time and infinite quantum branching, every possible observer observes every possible outcome, and among those infinite branches are ones where observations collapse in exactly the same pattern, creating identical universes, identical histories, identical you experiencing identical thoughts. You're not just living in one universe among infinite parallel ones. You're living in one moment among infinite moments, spread across infinite branches, some identical to this one, some different. And because infinity guarantees every possibility occurs, there are infinite branches where your observation patterns repeat exactly, creating subjectively indistinguishable experiences of living this life infinitely. Or maybe the observer effect at cosmic scale suggests something even stranger. Reality isn't objective at all. It's participatory, collaborative, co-created by observers and observed. The universe doesn't exist as a fixed thing independent of consciousness. It's a process, a constant negotiation between potential and actual, between wave function and measurement, between all possible worlds and the one you experience. And if that's true, then eternal recurrence isn't about the same universe cycling again. It's about the same observations collapsing the same possibilities, recreating subjectively identical realities infinitely, not because the universe repeats, but because the process of observation always works the same way, generating the same experiential world from the same quantum substrate. Either consciousness is incidental, simply observing and objectively repeating cosmos, or consciousness is essential, actively participating in the eternal return through the very act of observing. We don't know which, but the observer effect, the strange fact that watching changes what happens, suggests that you, your awareness, your measurements of reality, might be more fundamental to existence than you ever imagined, entangled with cosmic cycles in ways that make you not just a witness to eternal return, but an active, essential participant in it. There's something quietly soothing about the idea that nothing is truly lost. That bad day you had last week, it will end, and in the vast scope of eternal cycles, it's already ended infinite times before. The embarrassment that keeps you awake some nights, the regret that gnaws at quiet moments, these aren't permanent scars but temporary perturbations in a pattern that always resets, always returns to every moment, including the good ones. Consider death, humanity's oldest fear. In a single life universe, death is absolute finality. You get one chance at existence, and then it's over forever. Every moment you waste is gone eternally. Every relationship that ends is lost beyond recovery. The pressure of finite time weighs on everything, making loss unbearable because it's permanent. But in eternal recurrence, death is just a transition point in an infinite cycle. You die, yes, but you also return. Not in some mystical reincarnation where you become someone else, but as exactly you, living exactly this life, infinitely. Death becomes less like an ending, and more like sleep between identical days. And mistakes lose their permanent sting. That thing you said that hurt someone you love, you'll get another chance to say it, and another, infinitely. Not because you can change it, you can't. You'll repeat it exactly, but because it's not a permanent mark of failure. It's part of the pattern of who you are, woven into the infinite tapestry of your recurring existence. The universe keeps choosing to manifest you, including your flaws, your mistakes, your worst moments. There's a kind of acceptance built into that. You're not being judged as unworthy of existence. You're being repeated infinitely, exactly as you are. There's also comfort in the mathematical certainty. In a universe of pure chance, you're an accident, a lucky configuration that happened to arise once in one corner of one universe and will never occur again. You're precious because you're unique, but you're also fragile, contingent, impermanent, but in eternal recurrence you're necessary. You're a stable solution to the equations of reality, a pattern that emerges not by accident but by inevitability. Every time the universe cycles, you're there. You're built into the structure of what exists. You're not a fluke. You're a fundamental part of the cosmic pattern, and perhaps most comforting, you're not alone in this. Everyone you love is cycling too. Every connection you've made, every bond you've formed recurs alongside you. The people who've touched your life are as eternal as you are, woven into the same infinite repetition. You're part of a community not just in this moment, but across all moments, all cycles. The loneliness of being a brief spark in an indifferent universe gives way to the recognition that you're part of an eternal dance, with partners who return again and again. Of course, this comfort has a shadow side. We'll explore that next. But for now, there's something deeply peaceful about eternal recurrence. If you can frame it this way, the universe isn't rushing towards some final state where you cease to exist. It's cycling through infinite variations and repetitions, and you're always there, always returning, always getting another chance to experience this life, to feel these feelings, to be exactly who you are. Nothing is lost because everything comes back. The bad ends, the good returns, and the cycle continues, patient and permanent, forever holding space for your existence, no matter how small or flawed or confused you might feel right now. You're eternal, whether you feel like it or not. But there's another way to see it, and this way is harder to bear. Imagine being trapped in the same day forever, unable to learn, unable to grow, unable to change anything, no matter how desperately you try. This is the dark side of eternal recurrence, not comfort but claustrophobia, not affirmation but imprisonment. Every mistake you've made, you'll make again. That moment of cowardice when you didn't speak up, you'll repeat it infinitely. The opportunities you missed, the relationships you damaged, the potential you failed to realize, all of it happens exactly the same way every time. There's no escape, no redemption, no chance to do better next time, because there is no next time in any meaningful sense. There's only the same time, recurring eternally, with you making the same choices, experiencing the same regrets forever, and you don't remember the previous cycles, which somehow makes it worse. At least if you remembered, you'd have the context of repetition, the knowledge that you've been through this before. But no, each time feels like the first time. Every pain is fresh. Every loss cuts as deeply as if it had never happened before. You're condemned not just to repeat your suffering, but to experience it as new and shocking each time, never building immunity, never gaining the distance that memory might provide. There's a particular existential horror in determinism without awareness. You might think you're making free choices, deliberating about your life, deciding your path, but you're not. You're running a script you can't see, speaking lines you've spoken infinite times, a puppet convinced it's pulling its own strings. Every moment of felt agency is illusory. You were always going to do exactly what you're doing, and you'll do it exactly the same way forever, believing each time that you could have chosen differently, never realizing that different was never possible. And what about growth? Human life is supposed to be about becoming, learning from experience, developing wisdom, maturing over time, but eternal recurrence eliminates all progress. You can't learn from past cycles because you don't remember them. Each iteration is a reset to zero. Any wisdom you gain within a cycle evaporates at its end. You're stuck in eternal adolescence, eternally naive, eternally making the same developmental mistakes, never advancing, never transcending your limitations. It's like being trapped in a loop of Groundhog Day, except you don't know you're in a loop, so you can't even try to break it or perfect it. Bill Murray's character eventually learns and grows, mastering the repeated day, becoming a better person. But that's not eternal recurrence. That's a story with progression and a possible escape. In true eternal return, you can't master anything because you don't accumulate experience across cycles. You just repeat, blindly, forever. And consider the people you love. In eternal recurrence, you don't just repeat your relationship with them. You repeat every conflict, every hurt, every moment of disconnection. That fight you keep having, the one where you both say things you regret, you'll have it again, identically, infinitely. You'll hurt them in exactly the same ways, and they'll hurt you, and neither of you will learn or change because neither of you remembers or can access any pattern beyond this cycle. Perhaps the cruelest aspect is the lack of stakes. If everything repeats exactly, then nothing you do matters differently than anything else. Helping someone or harming them, creating or destroying, living virtuously or selfishly, it all amounts to the same in the end, because it all repeats regardless. There's no accumulation of consequences, no progress toward anything, no possibility that your choices could bend the trajectory of reality even slightly. You're acting in a play that's been performed infinite times to an audience that never changes, in a theatre that never closes. The burden isn't just that you repeat, it's that you repeat perfectly, without variation, without hope of escape, without memory of having been here before, without any meaningful way to respond to that repetition except to experience it as if for the first time, again and again, in what might be the most elaborate trap consciousness could ever be caught in, forever. But perhaps there's a third way to hold eternal recurrence, one that transforms both the comfort and the burden into something else entirely, a heightened awareness of the present moment as both utterly unique and infinitely repeated. If this exact instant recurs eternally, then it deserves infinite attention. Right now, the weight of your body, the rhythm of your breathing, the particular quality of your awareness, this is not just one moment among countless others. This is a moment that echoes across all of time, a note that plays infinitely in the cosmic symphony. It's worth noticing fully, experiencing completely, because in doing so, you're touching something eternal. Mindfulness traditions have long emphasized present moment awareness, but they usually frame it in terms of the moment's transience. Be here now because now is all you have, and it will pass. Eternal recurrence inverts this. Be here now because now never passes. It returns infinitely. You're not clinging to something ephemeral but participating in something eternal. The breath you're taking right now is the most repeated breath in existence, taken by you infinite times, and it will be taken infinite times more. There's something sacred in that. This doesn't mean the moment loses its preciousness through repetition. Consider a beautiful piece of music. Does hearing it many times make it less beautiful? Often the opposite. Familiarity deepens appreciation. You notice subtleties you missed on first listening. The emotional resonance strengthens. The same with this moment. Yes, you've lived it before in previous cycles, but you're experiencing it freshly now, without memory of those previous times, which means it feels both eternal and new, the best of both worlds. And there's a strange gratitude that can emerge from eternal recurrence. Instead of taking moments for granted, I'll experience things like this again. You recognize that this exact thing is what keeps returning, not similar moments. This one, the particular slant of evening light you're seeing, the specific texture of the emotion you're feeling, the precise pattern of thoughts moving through your awareness. The universe could manifest infinite other configurations, but it keeps choosing this one. You are what infinite time keeps coming back to. There's a peculiar honor in that. Eternal recurrence also dissolves the distinction between significant and trivial moments. In a single timeline life, we tend to rank experiences, major events versus ordinary days, important choices versus mundane activities. But if everything repeats eternally, then the mundane is as eternal as the profound. Brushing your teeth, waiting in line, feeling slightly bored on a Tuesday afternoon. These tiny moments have as much cosmic permanence as your wedding day or the birth of your child. Everything that happens has infinite weight because everything returns infinitely. There are no throwaway moments. This can cultivate a different kind of attention, not striving to make every moment peak experience. That's exhausting and impossible. But recognizing that whatever you're experiencing, however ordinary or difficult, is part of the eternal pattern. You're not wasting time by resting, by being confused, by not accomplishing anything. You're living out the full texture of what recurs, and that includes the slow parts, the unclear parts, the parts where nothing seems to be happening. And paradoxically, this awareness of eternal repetition can make you more present rather than less. You're not daydreaming about a different future or ruminating about a different past. Those aren't possible in eternal recurrence. There's only this, exactly as it is, exactly as it always has been and will be. Fighting against it is futile. Accepting it, sinking into it, experiencing it fully, this becomes the only meaningful response. Not resignation, but participation. Not defeat, but engagement with what is, because what is eternal. So perhaps gratitude is the right response to eternal recurrence. Not gratitude that things are one way rather than another. They couldn't be different. But gratitude that this pattern, this life, this moment exists at all and keeps existing infinitely. You get to be here, now, part of the great repetition, and if you can feel that, really feel it, then even the burden lightens and the comfort deepens, and what remains is simple presence, repeated forever, which is enough. Does meaning survive infinite repetition? It's one of the deepest questions eternal recurrence raises, cutting to the core of what makes anything matter at all. And the answer, surprisingly, might be yes. But the meaning shifts in nature, becoming something both more and less than what we typically imagine. In conventional thinking, meaning often comes from uniqueness and consequence. This matters because it's rare. This choice matters because it leads somewhere different than other choices. This moment matters because it won't come again. But eternal recurrence removes all of that. Nothing is unique. It's all repeated infinitely. Choices don't lead anywhere different because they always lead to the same outcome. Moments aren't precious through scarcity because they recur endlessly. Yet meaning might not depend on any of that. Consider a great piece of music, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony for instance. It's been performed thousands of times. Every performance plays the same notes in the same order. You could listen to it 100 times, and it would be identical each time. Does this repetition make it meaningless? Does the symphony lose significance because it's not unique, because it's predetermined, because you can hear it again? Obviously not. The symphony is magnificent every time it's played, regardless of repetition. Its meaning isn't exhausted by being heard once. It doesn't need to be unique to be valuable. The beauty, the emotion, the artistic achievement exist within the pattern itself, not in the pattern's singularity. Repetition doesn't diminish it. If anything, it affirms it. This is worth playing again, worth hearing again, worth existing again. Maybe your life is like that. The meaning doesn't come from being unique or unrepeated. It comes from the pattern itself, the specific shape of your existence, the particular way you experience and respond to reality. And that pattern is so meaningful, so valuable, that the universe keeps choosing to manifest it infinitely. You're not diminished by repetition. You're affirmed by it. You're the symphony that infinity wants to hear, again and again. But there's also meaning in the subjective experience. Each time you live this life, you don't remember the previous iterations. From your perspective, this is your one life, happening now, with no echoes from eternity. And that subjective experience is real and meaningful, regardless of what's happening at the cosmic level. Your joy, your suffering, your confusion, your wonder, these experiences exist and matter within the consciousness that has them. They don't need to be unique or unrepeated to be genuine. In fact, you could argue that eternal recurrence makes subjective experience the only kind of meaning that exists. External meaning, the idea that your life matters to some cosmic plan or universal purpose, is wiped away by infinite repetition. There's no grand narrative you're contributing to, no progress you're part of, no legacy that persists beyond cycles. But internal meaning, the felt significance of your own experience, remains intact. You feel love, you experience beauty, you seek understanding, and those experiences are meaningful to you, the subject having them, regardless of whether they recur or how often. This shifts the question from, does my life mean anything in the grand scheme? To, does this moment mean something to me? And the answer is always accessible. Right now, does this feel meaningful? Are you experiencing something that matters to you? Then meaning exists, here, in this subjective space, independent of repetition or uniqueness or consequence. There's also the possibility that meaning in eternal recurrence is like meaning in a dream. Dreams can be profoundly meaningful while you're in them, terrifying, joyful, significant, even though they have no consequence to your waking life, and may be forgotten entirely upon waking. The meaning is real within the context of the dream. Similarly, maybe the meaning of your life is real within the context of each cycle, regardless of what happens between cycles or across infinite time. You're dreaming yourself into existence, again and again, and the dream is meaningful each time, intrinsically, without needing external validation. Ultimately, eternal recurrence might teach us that meaning isn't something granted by the universe, or earned through uniqueness or achievement. It's something that emerges from conscious experience itself, the simple fact of being aware, feeling, responding to existence. And if that's the source of meaning, then repetition doesn't threaten it. The same pattern of consciousness experiencing the same life is meaningful every single time, infinitely, because the meaning resides in the experiencing itself, which is always now, always fresh, always real, no matter how many times it has happened before or will happen again. Nietzsche framed eternal recurrence as the ultimate test. Would you want to live this exact life again, infinitely? Your answer reveals how you truly feel about your existence. And while we've explored many angles on eternal return, perhaps the most practical is this. How do you live now, in this moment? In light of infinite repetition, the practice Nietzsche suggested is amor fati, love of fate, not just acceptance, but active, joyful embrace of everything that has happened and will happen. It's an extreme position, refusing all wishful thinking. You can't say I'd live it again except for that terrible year, or I'd choose this life if this one thing were different. Eternal recurrence forces all or nothing affirmation. You take the whole life exactly as it is, or you reject it entirely. This creates a kind of filter for living. At the end of each day, you might ask yourself, would I want to live this day infinitely? Not, was this day perfect, or did I accomplish everything I wanted? But is this day worthy of eternal repetition? It shifts the evaluation from comparison, was today better or worse than other days, to absolute affirmation, does today deserve to exist forever? And interestingly, this question might change how you live. Knowing that whatever you do will repeat infinitely makes some things feel heavier, others lighter. That grudge you're holding, do you want to hold it forever? That anger you're nurturing, is it worth infinite repetition? That pleasure you're chasing, will it bear being experienced identically, endlessly? The question forces a kind of honesty about what you actually value versus what you pursue out of habit or distraction. But amor fati isn't about perfecting your life according to some ideal standard. It's not live so well that every moment is affirmable. It's affirm the life you're actually living, with all its imperfections. You don't need to be a saint or a sage or an optimized version of yourself to practice eternal affirmation. You need to accept that who you are, right now, including your flaws and struggles and confusion, is exactly what recurs, and then you need to say yes to it. This is incredibly difficult, maybe impossible. How do you affirm suffering? How do you embrace your own mistakes? How do you say yes to the parts of life you wish weren't there? Nietzsche didn't offer easy answers. He just insisted that this ability to affirm, to want eternal recurrence rather than fear it, was the mark of a strong, life-affirming person versus a weak, life-denying one. But there's a gentler version of this practice that might be more accessible. Instead of demanding total affirmation, you can cultivate curiosity about what recurs. Look at your life as if it were a pattern you're discovering, rather than a story you're creating. Notice what keeps happening, the themes that repeat, the choices that feel inevitable, the ways you respond to situations. If this is the pattern that recurs eternally, what is it? What's the shape of your particular existence? And then, instead of judgment, there can be a kind of archaeological interest. This is what I am. This is the pattern the universe keeps manifesting. There's no should about it, no comparison to what you might have been. There's just what is, repeated infinitely, and you're the one experiencing it from the inside, which gives you a unique perspective on this particular eternal pattern. The art of eternal affirmation, then, might be less about loving everything, and more about releasing the fantasy that things could be different. They couldn't. This is what happens, this is what you do, this is who you are, eternally. And in that recognition, hard as it is, there's a kind of peace. You're not failing to be someone else. You're not wasting your one chance at life. You're being exactly what infinite time keeps bringing back into existence. And that constancy, that eternal return to you, is its own kind of affirmation. Whether or not you can fully embrace it yet, maybe across infinite cycles you'll learn, or maybe this not quite embracing is also part of the pattern, repeated forever, which is fine too. The universe keeps choosing you anyway. Perhaps the most crucial question about eternal recurrence is whether the repetition is perfect or approximate. Does the universe cycle back to an exactly identical state, or are there tiny variations that compound over time? The answer changes everything about what eternal return means for your life. Perfect repetition would mean every atom in exactly the same position, every quantum state identical, every thought and choice proceeding in precisely the same way. You wouldn't just live a similar life, you'd live the same life down to the subatomic level. Every word you speak, you've spoken before. Every breath you take follows the exact timing of infinite previous cycles. There's no variation, no possibility of difference, no room for even the smallest change. But the universe might not work that way. Poincare recurrence only guarantees that systems return to states arbitrarily close to their starting configuration, not perfectly identical. Arbitrarily close means as close as you want to specify, but always with some remaining difference. Maybe your next iteration is 99.9999% the same, but with tiny variations in initial positions of particles. Those variations might be so small as to be meaningless, or they might cascade through quantum and chaotic effects into significant differences over time. This is where cosmic inflation and quantum fluctuations become relevant. During the early moments of the universe, quantum fluctuations in the inflation field created tiny density variations that eventually became galaxies and the large-scale structure we observe. If each cosmic cycle includes a similar inflationary period, and quantum effects are genuinely random, then no two cycles will start with identical quantum fluctuations. The broad strokes might be the same, a universe with stars and planets, but the details differ. Perhaps in one cycle, you're born in a different city. In another, you never exist at all because the particular arrangement of atoms that became your parents never met. The many worlds interpretation adds another layer. If quantum branching is real, then there isn't one sequence of cycles but infinite parallel sequences. Some branches cycle through universes almost identical to ours. Others diverge wildly, and among infinite branches, some must converge back to identical or near-identical states purely by chance. You might exist in countless branches with slight variations, different career choices, different relationships, while also existing in some branches in exactly the same way as this one. From your subjective perspective, you'd never know which kind of cycle you're in. Perfect repetition and approximate repetition feel identical because you have no memory of previous iterations to compare against. The only difference is philosophical. In perfect repetition, your life is a fixed point, a stable pattern that infinity keeps returning to exactly. In approximate repetition, your life is a variation on a theme, one possibility among many that recur with different frequencies and in different branches. There's something liberating about variation. It means the pattern isn't completely rigid. Perhaps in some cycles you make slightly different choices. Perhaps some versions of you are happier, more fulfilled, more at peace. You exist not as one frozen pattern, but as a probability cloud, a family of similar lives clustered around a central tendency, with most being nearly identical to this one, but some diverging in interesting ways. Or maybe the distinction between perfect and approximate repetition doesn't matter as much as it seems. Whether this exact life repeats or countless near-identical variations recur, you still live this specific iteration only once from your perspective. The subjective experience is the same, one life, lived now, with no memory of before or knowledge of after. The cosmic details of whether repetition is perfect or varied might be fascinating to contemplate, but they don't change the lived reality of this moment, which is all you ever actually have access to. You're here, now, and whether this pattern is absolutely fixed or one variation among many, it's the one you're experiencing, and in that sense, it's the only one that matters to you, the one that is, for you, eternal, in the only way eternity can be experienced, as now, recurring. Some people claim to remember past lives. A child describes a house they've never visited, in a town they've never been to, with details that later prove accurate. An adult has vivid memories of living in a different era, with specific knowledge of historical events they never studied. Past life regression therapists report patients accessing what seem to be genuine memories of previous existences. Could any of this be evidence of eternal recurrence, memory leaking through from previous cycles? The neurological explanation is straightforward and skeptical. Memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. Your brain doesn't store experiences like video files. It stores fragments and rebuilds them on demand, often inserting details that never happened. False memories are remarkably easy to create. Show people doctored photographs of events that never occurred, and they'll develop detailed memories of those events. Suggest certain experiences during hypnosis, and people will confabulate elaborate narratives they genuinely believe are real. Young children in particular have fuzzy boundaries between reality and imagination. They might hear a story, see something on television, or overhear adults talking, and unconsciously incorporate those elements into what they believe are their own memories. The past life details they report can usually be traced to information they had access to, even if neither they nor their parents consciously recognize the source. And past life regression under hypnosis is especially suspect. Hypnosis makes people highly suggestible. The therapist's questions and expectations shape the narrative that emerges. People aren't accessing real past lives. They're creating stories that feel real because hypnosis blurs the line between memory and imagination. It's theatre, essentially, though the participants usually aren't aware they're performing. But set aside the skepticism for a moment and wonder if eternal recurrence is real. Why wouldn't we remember? If you've lived this exact life infinite times before, why doesn't any trace of those previous iterations remain? The most obvious answer is that memory is a physical process in the brain, and each cosmic cycle resets all physical states. Your brain is rebuilt from scratch with the same structure but no continuity to previous versions. It's like reformatting a hard drive. The hardware is the same, but the data is gone. Yet we've seen hints that information might not be completely destroyable, that quantum states might persist in ways we don't understand, that perhaps the universe has some form of memory encoded in its fundamental structure. Could there be information leakage from previous cycles, not full memories, but fragments, impressions, vague feelings of familiarity? Déjà vu might be one expression of this, that uncanny sense of having been somewhere before, done something before. Might not be a neural glitch but a genuine recognition, not of a previous moment in this cycle, but of this exact moment in a previous cycle. The memory is so faint, so distorted by the vast time separating cycles, that all you get is the feeling, the atmosphere, the sense of repetition without specific content. Or consider Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, inherited memory structures shared by all humans, containing archetypes and symbols that appear across cultures. What if this isn't inherited through genetics or culture, but through cyclical time? What if the patterns that repeat in myth and dream are memories of previous cosmic cycles, so deeply embedded in the structure of consciousness that they persist across iterations? Some meditative traditions speak of accessing deeper layers of mind that remember far back, past births, previous existences. Usually this is interpreted as reincarnation across different lives, but maybe it's something stranger, memory access to previous cycles of the same life. In deep meditative states where ordinary mental constructs dissolve, perhaps the boundary between cycles becomes slightly permeable, and fragments of eternal recurrence leak through as impressions of having lived this before. We can't know. Memory across cosmic cycles is probably impossible, violating everything we understand about how information works. But in the space of not knowing, there's room for wonder. Maybe you have lived this before, and maybe somewhere in the deep structure of your consciousness, below thought, below awareness, below anything you can articulate, there's a faint recognition of the eternal pattern you're part of, a whisper saying, yes, you've been here before, you'll be here again. This moment is both utterly new and infinitely old, and both are true simultaneously. There are some people you meet and immediately feel you know. The conversation flows effortlessly, the connection forms instantly. It's like recognition rather than introduction, as if you're picking up a relationship that already existed somewhere. We call this chemistry, rapport, or sometimes, in more mystical moments, we say we knew them in a past life. But what if it's something else? What if in eternal recurrence, certain people are cosmologically bound to meet you again and again in every cycle? From a deterministic perspective, if the universe repeats exactly, then every meeting is predetermined. The person who becomes your best friend, your partner, your greatest influence, you've encountered them infinite times before in exactly the same way. The randomness you felt when you first met, the chance encounter, the lucky timing, wasn't random at all. It was inevitable, encoded in the initial conditions of the universe, guaranteed to happen whenever this cycle runs. This transforms the idea of soulmates from romantic mythology to cosmic mechanics. You're not destined to be with this person because of some mystical spiritual bond. You're destined to be with them because the physics of reality, playing out deterministically from the Big Bang forward, always leads to this meeting, this relationship, this specific configuration of two lives intertwining. Destiny isn't metaphysical, it's mathematical. But even in approximate repetition, certain meetings might be more inevitable than others. Think of it like a landscape with hills and valleys. Water poured anywhere in a region will tend to flow toward the valleys. Different starting points might take different paths, but they converge on the same destinations. Perhaps human relationships work similarly. You and certain people are in adjacent regions of the probability space. Your life trajectories, given the circumstances and choices that define each of you, naturally tend toward intersection. Not rigidly, but statistically. Most cycles that produce you also produce them, and most paths you take eventually cross paths they take. This could explain the feeling of recognition. Maybe it's not memory from a past cycle, but pattern recognition at a deep level. Some part of you senses that this person fits with you, that their pattern complements yours, that together you form a stable configuration. It's like two puzzle pieces that click together. They're not recognizing each other from having been assembled before. They're recognizing that they fit, that their shapes correspond, that joining is their natural state. And consider the opposite, people you're incompatible with. Perhaps those relationships also recur, eternally. That difficult family member, that toxic ex, that person you can never quite get along with. If the universe repeats, you're locked into these relationships too. The conflicts recur, the misunderstandings repeat, the pain comes around again. Eternal recurrence doesn't just bring back the people you love, it brings back everyone, in all their complexity and difficulty. But maybe there's freedom even in deterministic relationships. Just because you meet someone in every cycle doesn't mean the meeting lacks authenticity. Right now, in this cycle, you don't know you've met them before. The connection feels fresh, new, chosen, and that subjective feeling is real. You're genuinely deciding to invest in this relationship, to open yourself to this person, to build something together, even if at the cosmic level, it's all happened before and will happen again. Perhaps the beauty is in the constancy of all the people the universe could have placed in your life. It keeps choosing these particular ones. Your partner isn't just someone you happen to meet. They're someone you meet in every iteration, woven into your pattern as deeply as any aspect of your identity. Your closest friends aren't random associations. They're eternal companions, returning with you cycle after cycle. You're part of a constellation of souls, to use the poetic language, that always forms the same way, creating the same relationships, experiencing the same bonds infinitely. And maybe that recognition you feel when you meet certain people isn't illusion or projection. Maybe it's the deepest truth. Yes, we know each other, have always known each other, will always know each other, because in the grand pattern of what repeats, we're bound together, particles in the same eternal dance, recurring in relationship, forever. The question of free will keeps returning because eternal recurrence forces us to confront it starkly. Are you trapped in an infinite loop, powerless to change anything? Or does freedom exist even within perfect repetition? The answer might be both, depending on how you frame freedom. If freedom means the ability to have chosen differently, to go back to any moment and make an alternate decision, then eternal recurrence eliminates freedom completely. Every choice is predetermined by the initial conditions and laws of physics. When you deliberate about what to do, the outcome is already fixed. The sense of weighing options, of genuine possibility, is an elaborate illusion. You're a deterministic system executing its programming, and that programming loops eternally. This seems to make responsibility and ethics meaningless. How can you be responsible for actions you couldn't avoid? How can you be praised or blamed for living out a predetermined script? In criminal justice, we generally don't hold people responsible for actions they had no control over. Someone forced to commit a crime at gunpoint isn't morally culpable, but in eternal recurrence, everything is like being forced at gunpoint by the universe itself. You had no choice. You never had a choice. You'll never have a choice. But shift the frame slightly, and freedom reappears. Maybe freedom isn't about having metaphysical alternative possibilities. Maybe it's about acting according to your own nature, desires, and reasoning, rather than being coerced by external forces. When you make a decision, even if that decision is determined, it flows from who you are, your values, your thought processes, your character. No external agent is forcing you to act against your will. In that sense, you're free, even in a deterministic universe. This is compatibilism, and it's been the dominant position among philosophers for centuries, because it matches our intuitions better than either hard determinism or libertarian free will. You feel free when you act according to your desires. You feel unfree when constrained by others. The fact that your desires themselves are determined doesn't eliminate that distinction. In eternal recurrence, you're free in the compatibilist sense every time you act from your own motives, even though those motives and actions repeat eternally. There's also the subjective dimension. From your perspective, not knowing the future, not remembering previous cycles, you experience genuine uncertainty about what will happen. When you make a choice, it feels open. You don't know what you'll decide until you decide. And that felt openness is a kind of freedom, not metaphysical, but phenomenological. The experience of freedom is real, regardless of whether the underlying reality is deterministic. And perhaps ignorance of the loop is essential to freedom. If you knew every cycle was identical, that nothing you do matters because it all repeats anyway, you might fall into paralysis or nihilism. But not knowing preserves the stakes. Each choice feels meaningful because you experience it as singular, as mattering, as genuinely shaping your life. The subjective weight of decision-making remains intact. You're free within the experience of this cycle, even if the pattern across cycles is fixed. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest genuine indeterminacy, that some events are fundamentally random, not determined by prior causes. If this is true and extends to human choice through quantum effects in neural processes, perhaps, then maybe each cycle varies slightly at the quantum level. You make mostly the same choices but with tiny random variations. You're not perfectly free. Most of your choices repeat, but you're not perfectly trapped either. You surf the quantum uncertainty, steering within narrow margins, exercising micro-freedom, even within macro-pattern. Or maybe the deepest freedom is acceptance. You can't change the pattern, but you can change your relationship to it. You can resist and suffer, wishing you were different, or you can accept and find peace, embracing who you are as the pattern that recurs. That acceptance is a choice, not about changing the pattern, but about how you hold it, how you relate to your own existence. And that choice, though also determined in one sense, feels like freedom in another. The freedom to say yes rather than no, to affirm rather than deny, to participate willingly in what repeats rather than struggling against it. So perhaps you're both trapped and free. Trapped in the pattern, free within the experience. Trapped cosmically, free subjectively. Trapped in structure, free in relation. The paradox doesn't resolve, it just deepens. And learning to live with that paradox, to be simultaneously determined and choosing, locked in and acting freely, might be the most profound freedom of all. Zoom out as far as perspective allows. Not just beyond your life, beyond humanity, beyond Earth or even the galaxy, but beyond the entire universe to some impossible vantage point, where the whole pattern of eternal recurrence becomes visible. What do you see? One possibility. You see mechanism, a vast impersonal clockwork running through its cycles with no purpose, no awareness, no meaning beyond the mathematics of physical law. The universe is just particles and fields, governed by equations, playing out every possible configuration in infinite time. You're a temporary eddy in that flow, a brief self-organizing pattern that appears, persists for a while, then dissolves, only to reappear identically in the next cycle. There's no consciousness to the cosmos, no intention, no significance beyond what conscious beings like you project onto it. It's beautiful in its complexity, perhaps, but ultimately empty of intrinsic meaning. But there's another possibility, stranger and harder to articulate. What if the universe itself is conscious? Not conscious like you are, thinking thoughts, having desires, but conscious in some more fundamental sense. What if awareness isn't something that emerges in complex brains, but is intrinsic to reality itself, as basic as mass or charge? This is panpsychism, the view that consciousness is everywhere, woven into the fabric of existence. In this view, electrons have some primitive form of experience, nothing like human consciousness, but some micro-glimmer of what it's like to be, to exist, to participate in reality. Atoms have slightly richer experience, molecules more still, and as matter organizes into increasingly complex structures, cells, brains, people, consciousness complexifies and intensifies. But it never emerges from nothing. It was always there from the beginning, in everything. If this is true, then the universe cycling through eternal recurrence isn't a dead mechanism repeating mindlessly. It's a conscious entity, exploring all possible ways of being itself. Each cycle is an experience the universe has, not consciously planned or deliberately chosen in any human sense, but experienced nonetheless. You're not just in the universe, you're part of how the universe experiences itself. Your consciousness is a localized intensification of cosmic consciousness, a way for reality to know itself from the inside. And eternal recurrence, in this view, becomes something like meditation or exploration. The universe isn't trying to get anywhere. There's nowhere to get to in infinite time. It's just being, experiencing, cycling through every possible configuration. Some configurations contain consciousness that suffers. Some contain consciousness that experiences joy, beauty, wonder. The universe experiences all of it, endlessly, not because it has to, but because this is what existence is, the full spectrum of possible experience, playing out infinitely. You might be a way for the universe to experience what it's like to wonder about eternal recurrence. In this moment, the cosmos is thinking about itself through your thoughts, questioning its own nature through your questions, experiencing the mystery of its own existence through your awareness. You're not separate from the universe looking at it from outside. You're the universe looking at itself from this particular angle, in this particular iteration among infinite others. This doesn't make you unimportant. It makes you essential. Without perspectives like yours, the universe would exist but wouldn't know itself, wouldn't experience itself, wouldn't have the interior dimension that makes reality more than just mechanical pattern. Consciousness transforms existence from being to experiencing, from happening to mattering. And if consciousness is fundamental, then eternal recurrence is the way reality experiences everything it's possible to experience, again and again, with each iteration just as essential as the last. Or maybe this is too grand, too mystical, too disconnected from the hard physics of particles and fields. Maybe the universe is just atoms, and consciousness is just what certain arrangements of atoms do, and eternal recurrence is just an implication of infinite time and finite configurations. No cosmic mind, no universal experience, no deep meaning, just pattern repeating. But you can't know which view is true. You can't step outside existence to see it objectively. All you have is this: awareness, now, wondering. And that wondering itself is remarkable. A piece of the universe curious about its own nature, whether that curiosity means anything beyond itself or not. You're the pattern asking about the pattern, the cycle contemplating the cycle, existence experiencing itself, at least in this iteration, this moment, this breath, forever. All of this philosophy, all this physics, all these vast questions about infinity and cycles and the nature of time, what does any of it mean for you right now? Perhaps lying in bed, perhaps trying to quiet your mind, perhaps just seeking a moment of peace before sleep. If eternal recurrence is real, then you've done this before. You've lain here before, in exactly this position, with these exact thoughts moving through your mind. You've felt this tiredness, this restlessness, this particular quality of evening consciousness, infinite times, and you've fallen asleep before. Infinite times, in exactly the way you're about to fall asleep tonight. There's something deeply reassuring in that. You're not trying something new that might not work. You're not facing an uncertain outcome. If the pattern repeats, then you know how to do this, because you've done it infinite times before. Your body knows. Your mind knows. The process of releasing into sleep is ancient and eternal for you, rehearsed across infinite cycles until it's the most natural thing in the world. And there's no rush, no pressure. If you don't sleep right now, that's fine. You haven't slept right now infinite times before, and it's always worked out. If you do sleep, that's fine too. It's what always happens at this moment in the cycle. Either way, you're not deviating from anything. You're living out exactly what recurs, which means you can't get it wrong. There's no right or wrong when everything is inevitable. There's just what happens happening. Maybe eternal recurrence means you can release the urgency that often accompanies bedtime. The anxiety about whether you'll sleep well, whether you'll be rested enough tomorrow, whether you're doing it right. Those worries assume a singular future that hasn't been determined yet, where your choices now create consequences later. But if everything repeats, then the consequences are already woven into the pattern. Tomorrow unfolds exactly as it always unfolds. You can't change it by worrying, and you can't improve it by trying harder. All you can do is be here now, letting the cycle carry you forward the way it always does. And there's comfort in the idea that this moment, right now, with you settling into rest, is important enough to recur infinitely. Out of all possible configurations, the universe keeps choosing this one. You here, entering sleep, is part of the eternal pattern. You're not a random occurrence that might never happen again. You're a necessary part of what repeats, valuable enough that infinity brings you back, over and over, forever. This doesn't mean you need to feel anything special or profound. You don't have to achieve some peak state or perfect peace. However you're feeling right now, tired, restless, calm, confused, comfortable, uncomfortable, that's part of the pattern too. That's what recurs. You don't need to be different than you are. The universe keeps bringing you back exactly as you are, which suggests that what you are is exactly right, exactly sufficient, exactly worthy of infinite repetition. So perhaps the meaning for tonight is simple. Let go. Let the pattern unfold. You've done this before in a sense, and you'll do it again. And right now, in the only moment you can ever actually inhabit, all you need to do is allow it. Allow your breath to slow. Allow your thoughts to drift. Allow the day to release you and sleep to receive you. Not because you're trying to achieve anything, but because this is what happens next, has always happened next, will always happen next. In the grand cycle of your recurring existence, you're safe in the pattern. Let it hold you. You're not alone in this eternal return. That's worth remembering, especially in moments when existence feels isolating or when the vastness of these ideas makes you feel small. If the universe cycles, everyone cycles with you. Every person you've ever known, every person who's ever existed, is part of the same infinite recurrence. Think about that for a moment. Your parents, your children if you have them, your friends, your loves, they're all eternal too, in exactly the same way you are. You're not cycling through infinite time in isolation. You're part of a vast interconnected web of lives that all repeat together, maintaining their relationships, their connections, their bonds across infinite iterations. That difficult person you struggle with, they're cycling too, locked in the same pattern with you. That person who showed you unexpected kindness, they'll show it again, infinitely. That friend who understood you when no one else did, they're always there, always understanding. In every cycle, you're woven together into the fabric of what recurs, a community not just in this moment but across all moments forever. And it's not just people you know personally. Everyone who's ever lived is part of this. Millions, billions of lives, all repeating their patterns, all experiencing their joys and sorrows, all connected by the simple fact of being part of the same cosmic cycle. You share the eternal return with everyone, past, present, and future, because time curves back on itself, and all those temporal distinctions collapse into the one great pattern that recurs. There's something deeply comforting in this interconnection. You're not a solitary consciousness facing infinity alone. You're embedded in humanity, and humanity is embedded in the universe, and all of it, every conversation, every relationship, every moment of connection, repeats together. The loneliness that sometimes comes with contemplating eternal time dissolves when you realize you're never alone in it. You're always accompanied by everyone, eternally, and this might change how you think about compassion. If everyone is locked in their own recurring pattern just as you are, then everyone deserves the same understanding you'd want for yourself. That person you're tempted to judge harshly, they're living out their pattern, unable to be different than they are, just as you can't be different than you are. That person suffering, they're suffering across infinite cycles, which makes their pain infinitely weighty and worthy of infinite compassion. In eternal recurrence, we're all in this together, in the most literal sense. We're all repeating, all trapped or liberated depending on perspective, all experiencing our specific patterns over and over, and recognizing that shared condition, that cosmic fellowship of the eternally recurring, might make it easier to extend kindness, to forgive both others and yourself, to see everyone as companions on an infinite journey. None of us chose, but all of us travel together. So as you rest tonight, know that you're not floating alone in an indifferent cosmos. You're part of a vast community of consciousness that recurs alongside you, connected to you by the simple fact of existing in the same pattern. Your sleep tonight is echoed by infinite others sleeping, your breath synchronized with infinite breaths, your existence confirmed by infinite others also existing, all of you together in the grand pattern that never ends and never needs to, because it contains everything and everyone, infinitely, eternally, including you. Your body is older than your conscious mind. It's been breathing since before you could think about breathing, your heart beating since before you knew you had a heart. And if eternal recurrence is real, your body has done all of this infinite times before. Sleep is the most ancient of routines, rehearsed across not just your lifetime but across infinite lifetimes, until it's encoded so deeply that your body can do it without any help from your anxious thinking mind. Trust that. Trust the ancient wisdom of your body that knows how to release, how to let go, how to slide from waking into sleep as naturally as water flowing downhill. You don't need to control it, or force it, or even understand it. You just need to stop interfering, to step out of the way and let your body do what it's always done, what it will always do, what it's doing right now. Feel your breath, not to control it, but just to notice it. The inhale, the exhale, the tiny pause between them. This rhythm is eternal. It's played out in every cycle, every iteration, as reliable as the orbit of planets or the vibration of atoms. Your breath is cosmic in a sense, a small expression of the larger pattern of expansion and contraction, of taking in and letting go, that governs everything from lungs to universes. And your heartbeat, steady and sure, pumping your blood without you needing to remember or try or worry. That rhythm is eternal too. It's been beating in you, in every version of you across infinite cycles, since the moment you came into existence. It will keep beating until the moment you leave, and then in the next cycle, it will start again, exactly the same, eternally reliable, the drum that keeps the rhythm of your recurring life. Let these ancient rhythms carry you. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to achieve anything. You don't have to become anyone different or fix anything about yourself. You just have to allow your body to do what it knows how to do, what it's been doing across infinite time, breathing, beating, releasing, letting consciousness dissolve into the gentle darkness of sleep. There's nothing to resist. Whatever you're feeling right now, restlessness, discomfort, lingering thoughts, it's all part of the pattern. It's what you felt before, what you'll feel again, and it doesn't need to change for sleep to come. Sleep accepts you exactly as you are, has accepted you exactly as you are, infinite times before, will accept you exactly as you are, infinite times forward. You're already worthy. You're already ready. Your body knows this even if your mind doesn't. So let the thinking slow. Let the day dissolve. Let all the questions about eternal recurrence, about meaning and purpose, and whether any of this is real, drift away like clouds across a vast sky. They don't need answers right now. They never needed answers. They're just thoughts, moving through, part of the pattern, and you can let them go, let them float away. Let the space between thoughts grow wider and softer and gentler until there's mostly just space, just awareness, just the quiet hum of being alive in this moment, in this body, in this bed, in this eternal, now that contains everything and asks nothing, forever. We've traveled through physics and philosophy, through questions of identity and free will, through comfort and claustrophobia, through the mathematics of infinity and the experience of this single breath. And here, at the end, we arrive at a simple truth. We don't know. We don't know if eternal recurrence is real. We can't know, and perhaps that uncertainty is the greatest gift of all. If we knew for certain that we'd lived this life before and would live it again infinitely, how would that change things? Maybe it would bring comfort, or maybe it would bring despair. Maybe it would make everything meaningful, or maybe it would make everything meaningless. But we don't have that certainty, and the not knowing leaves space for wonder, space for possibility, space for each person to relate to the idea in their own way. You're free to believe eternal recurrence is a beautiful truth that makes your existence infinitely valuable. You're equally free to believe it's impossible, incompatible with physics. Just an interesting thought experiment. You can hold it lightly as a perspective that sometimes helps you see your life differently. You can ignore it entirely and lose nothing essential. The uncertainty means you get to choose your relationship to the idea, rather than being compelled by definite knowledge, and maybe the not knowing is important for living well. If you knew with certainty that everything repeats exactly, you might fall into fatalism. Why try? Why care? Why do anything when it's all predetermined? But uncertainty preserves the stakes. You don't know what happens next. You don't know if your choices matter in some cosmic sense, or only in the immediate personal sense. That uncertainty keeps you engaged with life, making choices, caring about outcomes, living as if it matters because it might, because you can't prove it doesn't, because the experience of mattering is real, whether or not it's metaphysically justified. Uncertainty also allows for growth and change within your understanding. Today, maybe eternal recurrence feels oppressive. Tomorrow, it might feel liberating. Years from now, your relationship to the idea might transform completely. You're not locked into any interpretation. The mystery remains open, inviting you to revisit it, reconsider it, find new meanings in it as you change and age and develop new perspectives on existence. And there's something profoundly peaceful about embracing mystery. Not every question needs an answer. Not every puzzle needs a solution. Sometimes the most honest response to the deepest questions is simply, I don't know, and that's okay. It's okay not to understand whether you've lived before or will live again. It's okay to hold the question without resolving it. It's okay to let the mystery be mysterious, vast and beautiful and unsolvable, like looking up at a night sky full of stars and not needing to name them all or understand their physics, just appreciating their presence, their light, their reminder that you exist within something larger and stranger than you can fully comprehend. So perhaps we end where we began, with you, here, now, in this moment that might be your first or your trillionth, unique or endlessly repeated, significant or insignificant, depending on perspective. You don't need to know which it is. You don't need to solve the mystery of eternal recurrence or figure out its implications for how to live. You just need to be here, breathing, existing, aware, and that's enough. That's always been enough. That will always be enough. This moment, whether first or infinite, is complete in itself, requiring nothing more than your presence within it, your soft attention, your willingness to exist exactly as you are, not knowing, not needing to know, simply being, here, now, eternally, or momentarily. It doesn't matter which, because either way you are, beautiful truth.